Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. So, it's been a while since last time I'd seen this movie. This is only my second time seeing it. I thought it was okay. I thought it was pretty fun. Not like the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. I thought I was gonna like it more than I did. I don't know. I mean, it could also be because I don't really know much about Sherlock Holmes. I know it's one of those things that it's kind of like when I was talking about Robin Hood, where like the Disney one, where it's one of those things where it's like a classic, story, and there's like a billion different like movie adaptations, and I'll only know like a couple of versions, or like the Disney one or whatever, specific ones. Actually, the ones with Robert Downey Jr., the from like the 2000s, or the version of Sherlock Holmes I'm like most familiar with, to be honest with you. I do think it's kind of funny with this one that the characters they're not named like Sherlock and Watson. They're named Dawson and Basil. I think that kind of helps sort of separate it as like its own thing. And of course, all the characters are like talking mice, and one of them's a rat, and there's also a cat, and there's also a dog. It's kind of like Robin Hood being like, okay, everyone's like represented by an animal now and stuff. But it's like a simple story. I like how it's treated in this movie of being like Dawson meeting Basil at the beginning, and this is like Dawson reminiscing about his first case, basically, is the story, which I think is kind of cool because it's also the characters kind of getting to know each other a bit. And their first case is there's this little girl named Olivia, and her dad ends up getting kidnapped by the movie's villain, Ratigan, who's a pretty fun villain, honestly. I think he was one of my favorite things about this movie. And she goes to Basil and tries to ask for help, and Dawson ends up taking her there, and that's how everyone meets each other. And then the three of them, but mostly Basil and Dawson, have to like work together to find out where her dad's being held. And then they do this thing, like I think like halfway through or something, where Olivia ends up getting kidnapped and they have to go save her. So it's like a pretty simple story, but I think it's fun to watch, honestly. And I like how at the beginning they do show, but it's only in like silhouettes, like the actual Watson and Sherlock that exists, as like humans in this universe. Not that these mice are like the replacements, they're more like the animal versions of them that also exist at the same time, which is kind of cool. It kind of reminds me of like with Robin Hood, the rooster character saying like, oh, us animals in the Sherlock forest have like our own version of Robin Hood. So it's like the animal and human counterparts like both exist in the same world, where it's basically like we see the actual Sherlock, but he's in his window, he's always playing the violin. He doesn't get any lines, he's just a silhouette up there. But then you see in like a small part of the main house is like also where his mouse counterpart lives. So I think that's pretty cool. But I like the characters. I think Basil's cool because he's so very like animated with his movements and stuff, and just I feel like any version of Sherlock I watch is kind of like, your brain's kind of going all over the place, so it ends up being really fun to watch. And then Ratigan being voiced by Vincent Price is also really cool. I was also thinking about that with like his outfit as well, with like the cape and everything. But I think he was my favorite character because like every once in a while he has this kind of like crazed look in his eyes, and then remembers he's like trying to look kind of more what's the word I'm trying to think of, like he doesn't like being reminded that he's a rat. He hates it because he lives amongst like mice and stuff. He like wants to be seen as a gentleman, but he's not just because he's like a huge rat and everyone's a mouse, but also that he has an anger problem, and he's not really who he seems. And so it's kind of this like anger sort of bubbling under the surface until eventually like at the end when he has to fight Basil, it's like his true self kind of comes out more, and it's like a complete like switch and things. I'll talk about that more when I get there. He ends up having a song in this. It's really catchy. I wish he had more singing parts, his own song, because it's not really him singing it. It's more of he has these like couple of mice that work for him, and they're actually no, that's I think the same way that Gaston's song is in Beauty and the Beast, where it's like people that admire the villain are singing about how great they are, but like the villain also has like lines within their own song. Those songs end up being fun, but I also could have seen this as the kind of character that absolutely could have had his own song where he's like singing throughout his own songs. That would have been cool, but I'm fine with what we got. This one doesn't really have, actually I think that is the only like song that's sung by the no there's a song that's sung later. I forgot about that. There's a part with this like nameless female mouse, or I don't think she had a name, where the characters are in a bar and Basil and Dawson are in disguise. I really liked whatever that song was that the mouse was singing in that at the bar. That was cool. I also liked the non-mice characters as well, because there's a dog, the hound that you see on the cover belonging to Basil, and then Ratigan has his own, I guess, pet that's this cat that goes around eating people. And I like that when he threatens people, he just rings this little bell and you're like, what? But then the cat shows up and it'll eat someone. And I like how at first it's played as like this sort of serious threat, and then every other time the cat shows up after that and the bell is seen or rung, it's just kind of treated as like a joke, or like you already know what's coming and the person's like eaten off screen or whatever. But I just do find that funny, because like the dog and the cat, they don't talk or anything, they're just treated as like a normal dog and cat. But then the mice characters and stuff, like they're like the dog and cat's owners in that sense are, or I'm assuming the mice like literally don't own these dog and cats and stuff, because they all have like collars and things, but it's more of so they're like animal friends, but it's like lesser levels of sentience, just non-talking dog. But I still think that's kind of funny. There's a part where they end up going to like a human-sized toy shop. I liked that it was like a little creepy. They're having to sneak around, and just some of the designs of the toys for like human children were kind of creepy. There was a couple of clowns. I remember there was this like jester or something, one of those Jack in the Box things, and the face on it looked like a little bit creepy the way it was painted, and I'm like, ugh. But there's a chase scene in that like toy room area that was pretty cool. I like that Basil actually doesn't win, and I think that's how Olivia ends up kidnapped or something, because one of the characters that works for Ratigan is this bat that at first is kind of a little it is like kind of more of a threat originally, and then doesn't really seem like a threat later on, where it's the creature that shows up in the middle of the night and originally kidnaps Olivia's father, and then the bat, you find out, does talk later on. It's just like a little bit goofy. That was kind of funny. I liked the part when Basil and Dawson, they end up finding Olivia, and Ratigan knew that Basil would, you know, big brain his way there and everything, and he, to the point where he has a banner out and it just says "Welcome Basil," and not even really that it's a trap, just that they knew he would show up, and Ratigan's just there and being like, oh, I was wondering when you were going to show up. And then he puts Basil and Dawson in this like actual mousetrap thing, but then also has this like death contraption, whatever, that he had Olivia's dad built. And I like that I always find this funny with villains when they take the time to actually explain their like crazy death contraption of like, this is exactly how it works, this is how it's gonna kill you. And I know he's doing it to like brag and be smug and whatever, and being like, haha, I win, but I also feel like that's a bad idea to explain to a character that's like basically Sherlock Holmes, of like, hey, this is how my trap works, because that's basically like saying, hey, this is how you can get out of the trap. And of course they get out of the trap. And I like how it's in this kind of crazy way where as soon as Ratigan leaves, Basil's like, okay, let's trigger the trap now, yippee, and they trigger it with some like insane timing or whatever, and they not only get themselves out of it, but Olivia at the same time is trapped in this like giant green bottle, and they managed to get her out too. That was kind of cool. And then I forgot that part of the plot was that the Queen of England gets replaced, the Mouse Queen of England, I should say, gets replaced with a robot, and it's basically a way for like Ratigan to take the throne. But then I like that Basil ends up showing up behind the scenes, but you don't know that at first, and the robot's suddenly speaking like really badly about Ratigan, and might as well be like cursing him out. Not actually cursing him out, but like almost a step there. And then you see it's just Basil speaking through like a microphone thing or whatever. And then it goes to they end up like rescuing the actual queen and stuff. I'm kind of like skipping around in my notes. This is probably going to be like 10 minutes or something, because I barely have any notes for this movie. Not that's anything against the movie or whatever. I just didn't, and I enjoyed it. I just didn't feel like I had a lot to talk about, really. But I think my favorite part of the movie is when Basil ends up, he gets like knocked unconscious or something, and he wakes up on the skier, because at this point, the characters have crashed inside of Big Ben, like the whole clock and everything, so you get to see all the gears, and he wakes up on a gear, and the camera kind of like pans out, and it shows that there's these giant gears inside of the clock and everything. And I like how the gears, I mean, the characters, this is like a 2D animated movie and stuff, but the gears looked like they were 3D, which I feel like I was a little surprised by, because I think this movie's from like the 80s or something, but it made me kind of sad, because it made me think of like some of the movies in the early 2000s, like Atlantis and Treasure Planet, which I like both of those, but Treasure Planet's one of my favorite Disney movies, and how that felt like kind of the timeline peak to me of like 2D animation, but then with 3D stuff, but in a way where it like blends together. Not that you can't tell them apart like in some movies, but where they're kind of working together, or the 3D's used kind of sparingly. Like I liked it here, where it, from what I noticed anyway, it's only really used with these giant 3D gears, and I think that was a good choice. I think it made it look really cool and kind of more of a like a whoa, this is a crazy environment sort of thing, because I felt like it made the gears feel more real and everything. It doesn't make the 2D look weird, so I thought that was really cool. But that's one of my favorite parts of the movie. And then at that point, Ratigan is holding Olivia hostage, and Basil has to go rescue her. And at this point, he's gone like full rat, as I'll call it, where he's like scrambling around on all fours, like running on all fours, and his jacket's ripped a little bit, and he's just he has this wig too. I completely forgot that he wears this like toupee thing or whatever, and I think he accidentally rips it off in anger, and he's just like this huge looming figure, because he's like a giant rat compared to these mice, and he has like claws and stuff. Not that he looks completely monstrous, but it's kind of showing of like he's kind of given into his rage in a sense, and I thought that was cool, because like the entire movie he's like kind of trying to keep that hidden. He's trying to like blend in with the mice. I mean, I think the mice characters are all aware, that he's like obviously a giant rat and stuff. It's just that he gets like super pissed when anyone points it out, and at this point he doesn't care, and his more like Ratly features show as he's like just wanting to like kill Basil at this point. And it's not like a long chase or anything, and defeating him like that whole segment like barely takes any time at all. It's just kind of at the end of the movie where they kind of run through Big Ben a little bit on the inside, and then they end up ending up on the outside of it, and they both fall through and towards the ground. And you don't see Ratigan or anything. It's kind of crazy, because I don't even remember him like screaming or anything. It just falls, and Basil also falls, and then Basil comes back up. There's like clouds in the way or something on this little like propeller device thing that's like lifting him upwards, because the rest of the characters are on what looks like a little hot air balloon or kind of like a blimp or something. But yeah, that was I wasn't expecting that, of having the villain fall and there's not like a scream or anything. They both just fall, and then it's only just one person that comes up, and you just assume like, oh, okay, Ratigan's like dead at this point. He did not come through. I kind of wish we could have seen it, but it almost makes me wish that whole part of like trying to chase him around, them like chasing each other, was like a little longer, because that was really cool. But I also understand why it was short. And then they end up saying goodbye to Olivia, and I like that at the beginning Basil I'm assuming he's never really interacted with children because he doesn't really seem to know what to do with Olivia or care about her or anything. Like he does help her and stuff, but I think it's more about at the beginning of like, oh, this is my chance to catch Ratigan, because she mentions, oh, this big bat-like creature came, and he's like, whoa, what did it look like and whatever, because he knows the bat works for Ratigan. And he doesn't want to take Olivia along with him and Dawson to go investigate, and just kind of looking down on her mostly for being a child. And then at the end, he seems a little sad to see her go, and I thought, oh, that's kind of sweet. They've both kind of grown, both him and Dawson, to like care about Olivia and stuff. And Basil seems like he's a bit nicer than how he was at the beginning. And then Basil like really doesn't want Dawson to go, which I thought was sweet, where he's kind of hoping that he'd stay, but doesn't really outright say it. And then there's this mouse lady that shows up and is like, hey, I need your guys' help. And then Basil's immediately like, yep, I'm gonna help you. I'm Basil. This is my trusted assistant Dawson, which kind of forces Dawson to say. But I think they both wanted him to stay anyway. And, you know, with this being their first case, this end of the movie marks their, like, future partnership and stuff, and I think that's kind of a cool route to go, of like they're meeting each other for the first time at the start and them working together through this case. But that's pretty much all my notes I had for this. I thought it was pretty fun. I feel like even though this is the one that's based on Sherlock Holmes, I feel like a part of my brain gets this and The Rescuers kind of mixed up. Just the fact that there's like multiple Disney movies about these in the 80s. I think Rescuers 80s. I think it's 70s or 80s. I don't remember. But yeah, multiple older Disney movies about mice going on adventures and stuff. I find that kind of funny. And I like that the mice are drawn in like completely different art styles, where the Rescuers have like different faces. They kind of remind me of some of the mice from, what am I thinking of? Like Cinderella? No, not Cinderella. Hold on. Now I have to look up a picture, because the Rescuer mice have like I think just like big black eyes, kind of. Yeah, their eyes are in like a different art style. They're kind of a lot more simpler, I guess. And then the ones in when is that movie from? Oh, okay, it's from 1977. I thought so. I knew it was like 70s or 80s. It's also another good one. And then the ones in Great Mouse Detective have like the big white eyes and the pupils, kind of more like human-like, I guess, eyes. But yeah, this was a cool movie. I don't know if I'll talk about the other mice movie. And then Rescuers has a sequel, which I'm surprised it has a sequel. I think I've seen that before, but I don't remember it. But I remember liking the first one, so maybe I'll talk about that at some point. I don't know. But yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on this. I actually have another review I'm going to do of a movie I've watched already, of a different movie in the 80s, but it's about cats this time. It's not the Aristocats, it's actually Oliver and No, that one's about dogs, but the main character's a cat. Yeah, Oliver and Company. I think that one's based on like Oliver Twist or something. I don't really remember. I'm just mostly wanting to talk about it because Billy Joel voices one of the characters and he's one of my favorite musicians, so you'll get a review of that. All right, bye-bye.